Hi there, my name is Matt Young. I am the founder of a ministry called Engage the Nations. I operate as probably the best way to describe is as a missionary. I travel to other countries, minister locally, and have kind of a prophetic apostolic healing ministry. And what I want to tell you about today is my last trip to Malawi this summer. And first of all, I just want to thank all of you that prayed for the trip that my daughter and I went on. Just God showed up. God did some amazing things, and that's what this video is about. I just want to kind of give you a recap of what God did on this trip and how your financial support as well as your prayer support just really blessed myself, my daughter, and the people of Malawi. So let's just jump right in. So I met a man named Gideon who lives in Malawi. I actually met him in Uganda the last time I ministered in Uganda. And he came and ministered with me. And of course, while we were ministering together, God healed a lot of people, delivered people, saved people. And, as we talked more and more, he invited me to come minister to Malawi. Now, my daughter and I had gone to Malawi 3 years prior. And so it was a familiar country to go to. And he was from the region called Doha. And I apologize in advance to my African friends if I say the names of the villages as well as the regions wrong, but I believe it's called Doha, and that's where he was from, and he is from a village. I believe it's called Kakoli, if I'm pronouncing it right, and he grew up in that village, and he went to college. He's the highest educated person in that village. And he's gone to college and all this kind of stuff. So he is an evangelist. So when he invited us to Malawi, we partnered together. So he would share the gospel. People would get saved. I'd preach or teach a little bit. And then what we'd see is God heal, like I said, and deliver people. So I want to tell you a little bit about that. So day one, we went to Gideon's home village. We're warmly welcomed by the chief as well as all the people of that village. Preached the gospel, people got saved, and then as is typical in Africa, lined everybody up and started praying for people. God was healing all kinds of physical issues, HIV, you name it. And it's the awesome thing about Africa is people are open to the gift of healing. They're open to signs, wonders, and miracles. They know they still happen today. And it's just a great place to go because, Africans are very hospitable. They're very welcoming. They're very loving. And what's fun is, so we went to the meeting, great meeting. Like I said, God healed a lot of people. And then oftentimes what happens is somebody can't make it to the meeting because it's too far to walk. Because, many times they'll walk miles and miles and miles to go to a ministry like this. And so instead we drove it seemed like out in the bush and went to pray for a person who needed some deliverance. And as we prayed for that man, we got done praying for him. God touched him, and then this woman walks up with a stick, and she's pulling this other woman by the stick, and it turns out she's blind, and that's why she's kind of leading her around very carefully. And so, as you do when you pray for someone who needs healing, we just asked, it was obvious that she was blind, but we asked through the interpreter, we said, I didn't say how blind are you, but tell us, what can you actually see? And the woman's like, nothing. I see black. And this is how awesome God is. So we go to pray, and God instantly heals her. So she can literally see for the first time since she was a little girl. And this woman was probably in her 70s or 80s. And of course she was overjoyed and excited. And, and you just come to expect that God does these kind of things. So that was really, just a really awesome thing. We had her test her eyes to, and just to make sure, like, hey, what can you actually see? What is that over there? And she's like, well, that's a tree. Well, what is that over there? That's the little boy. And she describes what the boy's, and you could just see on her face, she was just so blessed that God touched her. So the second day we went to a place called Nambaba, I believe is how it's pronounced. I taught him the gift of healing, the 7 spirits of God, and same thing. We prayed, prayed for people to be healed, And during that meeting, as we usually do, Gideon kind of starts it off, explains who I am, why I'm there, and then he shares the gospel. And it was amazing. People always say Africa is an over-evangelized nation, and they say things that just aren't true. They've never been to Africa. They don't really know. And Africa is still ripe for a harvest. There's a lot of good things that are going on in Africa, but this was a great point. There was about 100 people that got saved for the first time. These weren't people rededicating their lives. These are people that were hearing the gospel for the first time in a village, literally hours and hours, drive in the middle of what seemed like nowhere. And so as I began to minister, I knew what I was going to teach on. And, and then as often happens, God's like, no, this is what I want you to do. And so we just started praying for them to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. And many of them had never even heard of that, knew what that even was. And as we started praying, you would just see, one person start getting baptized in the Holy Spirit, another person, and they would be speaking in tongues. And others are like, what's going on? And it kind of reminded me in the book of Acts of what happened, when the fire of God came and people started speaking in tongues. People were like, what is going on? And there was just kind of a roar in the room, and it was just amazing. So what was also fun, again, we prayed for people after the service with heart issues, physical pain. There was one woman who had spent, all of her money to get healed, and the doctor couldn't heal her, and yet God healed her just simply with a prayer. And, the nice thing is, it's been about a month since I went to Malawi, so I followed up with Gideon and asked, so tell me the testimonies, because oftentimes in certain denominations, for whatever reason, people teach that you can lose your healing, and I just don't see people losing their healing. And I follow up with them, and this woman who had all these physical issues, and it would happen every time that she would go to bed at night. She would be attacked spiritually. She'd have all these physical pains, and so she would get almost zero sleep. And of course, the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong, but God healed her in an instant. So it's really, really amazing. In that service, I do believe that God healed every single person that came forward. There was another woman who was blind that God healed, and if you're not familiar with the gift of healing, sometimes there's a miraculous healing where they're healed instantly, and sometimes you have to pray multiple times. So I just take my time. And the great thing about Africa is they're in no rush. They want to see their brothers and sisters get healed too. So sometimes you end up praying for someone for 15 minutes, and God gradually heals them through that process of just loving them, taking the time to minister to them. So it's just really cool. And the fun thing about that is, in that village, many of you who already know some of this stuff, they didn't have any Bibles, and a Bible is probably about $6 to $7 in Malawi. And, that's way more than they can afford to pay for a Bible. And so some generous people donated money, and we bought a whole box of Bibles and delivered them to that ministry. And it was fun for Olivia, because she's the whole time, she fully expects God to heal people. She's praying with me the whole time. And it's hours upon hours of ministry. And for a 10-year-old to not get tired, to not complain, I mean, she is a superstar. I was kind of expecting that, there'd be like, hey, Dad, I'm hungry. Hey, Dad, can I play with the iPad? But she was a trooper. She just kept praying and praying, never complained. And then afterwards, she would go play with the village kids, and there'd be, hundreds of kids that she would just run around, and she'd be exhausted, and, she was having the time of her life. So, and of course, the people in Africa are amazing to her, and treated her really well. So, I want to talk about day 3. As often happens, sometimes we showed up really, really late to the meeting, and most of the people had left because they thought we weren't coming. And so you kind of have to, you get on the public address system and you start announcing that, we're here and what God's going to do. And so then a crowd started coming. And before you know it, you have a really large crowd. And what was fun about this group of people, it was probably like half like teenagers. And so having been a youth pastor, it's always fun to minister to teenagers. We started taking them through activations, started teaching them a little bit of the prophetic. And what was really fun is one of the pastors in that area, he is like just a fiery prophetic guy. And so I just had him come minister with us. So it was Gideon, myself, this man Eric, and then Eric's son was, as well as Olivia, was also praying for people. And of course, God's healing, people after people after people. And one of the highlights of that, which was pretty cool, is there was a woman who couldn't speak, and she was from like the northern region of Malawi, and so she spoke a different language. And so as we prayed, and we probably prayed for her for 20 minutes. It was a gradual process. She started saying words, and this is like a 30-40-year-old woman who hasn't ever spoken. And so we'd say stuff to her in her ear, and then she would say it back. And before we even prayed for her, she couldn't speak at all. And so it's pretty cool to see God, still today heal people who can't speak, who can't see, who can't hear. Day 4, we again, same thing. We went and ministered healing, deliverance. Again, another testimony. This is the other thing that I've noticed on trips like this, is you start to see a theme of what God is doing. And the theme on this trip seemed to be people who couldn't see. There was a man probably in his 50s or 60s. He could see, but he couldn't actually read. And so we took a Bible, because you always want to test, because you want to see for yourself, but you also want to see for the person, how much can you actually see? How much can you actually read? And so we brought out a Bible and we said, hey, read this. And he couldn't see any of it. So we prayed, nothing happened. So we prayed again, nothing happened. Pray again. And he starts reading Psalm 52. So he can see the bigger writing. And so we prayed more and more. And again, probably 20 minutes, all of a sudden, just one of the times we prayed, he starts reading everything. And he smiles and he goes, you know what this means? He goes, I need a Bible because I don't have a Bible. So now that I can read, can you get me a Bible? So again, the people that were generous and gave to the trip, we took some of that money and bought many of the people in that village Bibles, and specifically that man. And I believe there's a video on Facebook you can watch and see him share the testimony about how God healed him. Some fun things that we did, we ate at different people's houses, and just the hospitality was, just wonderful. Great food there, lots of fun. And every day, it's a day of ministry. So we went to another place. I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce it. If I spelled it, you'd go, yeah, that's a tough one to say. But I can tell you it was Living Water Church. We actually went to the center of the marketplace and then did ministry there. Again, same thing. Did some prophetic ministry, prayed for everybody to heal. God healed everyone. And I want to talk about one of the places we went. If you guys are familiar with visions, this man walked into the back of the room during one of the services, and I just had this vision. And it was, the best way I can explain it is like there was what's going on in the natural, so seeing people come into the church, and then seeing like a whole nother film that's going on that's not like a natural thing. And what I was seeing is this, as this man walked in, I was seeing myself give my coat to him and take his coat and just prophesy over him about his destiny and his future. And what was really funny is he had gotten up like during the part of the singing worship part of the service, and he had actually taken off his coat. And so like right in the beginning of the service, and he lived probably a 20-30 minute walk away, I just shared like, this is what I saw, and I'd like you to go back and get the coat. Now I had no idea he had a 20 or 30 minute walk, but it was worth it. So by the time we got to the end of the service, I just told people, when this man comes back, I'm going to prophesy over him. So we started praying for healing for people, and then he came back, and so I prophesied over him. I gave him my coat because that's what God showed me what I needed to do. And God told me, don't take his coat, actually give it back. And so I just prophesied over him an apostolic anointing and some of the things that would be a part of his future, which was really, really fun. And then I had him actually pray with us, which I think is really, really important, that when God actually shows you stuff about people. And of course I asked God, should I have this guy pray for him? I mean, I've never met him before in my entire life. It's the first time I've ever saw him. And so he then started praying with us to see God heal people, which was just great. It's one thing to give somebody a word, but it's a whole nother thing to just activate them in the healing ministry right away. So as I said, most of these places we went, kind of the same thing. Taught a little bit, prayed for people to be healed. Very, very expectant. We went on a hike to an amazing mountain that overlooked the whole region of Dawa. One of the funny things that I hadn't planned, but I thought was pretty prophetic, is that we went to the four corners of Doha. I said Doha. It's actually Doha. Went to the four corners of Doha, this region, and ministered in the four corners. So I thought that was pretty interesting that God would have us go into those four corners. And then we went on to this, I believe it's called Nagara mountain, and got to overlook the whole region, which was really cool. And it's where many Africans go. Just like Jesus, when Jesus went up into the mountains to pray, many Africans go up there to pray and stay the night. And it's funny, Gideon had shared a story that he went up there one night to pray, and there was a hyena that actually came, and so he prayed up a storm, and he did not sleep that night, and had a stick and a fire, and luckily the hyena left him. But yeah, it sounded pretty scary. One of the last days, I got to minister in a Presbyterian church, which was pretty cool because years ago I did an internship in a Presbyterian church, and so this Pastor Tad, he was amazing. We actually stayed in his home, got to meet his kids. Just very hospitable. His kids were amazing, and ministered to a few hundred people, or a couple hundred people. You can see pictures on Facebook if you want to see. And he asked me to teach on what is a missionary. And so that was fun as someone who's traveling to Malawi to get to teach first in Chichewa, or the second service was in Chichewa, so Gideon interpreted. And then the first service was, in English. So just a really fun time. And everywhere Olivia and I went, the people were just fabulous. They were very grateful for us coming, and definitely invited us to come back. So, that's kind of it. That's the recap of the trip. So again, I just want to thank you for giving financially to Olivia and I. Thank you for praying for us. And if you have an interest in continuing to support this ministry, I will be going to Uganda in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I'll be taking a team with me, and we'll be doing more of the same. And in this trip to Uganda, we'll be ministering to about 200 pastors. We're actually going to have a conference, do some leadership training, do some discipleship training, and then we'll be ministering in the villages and as well as in Kampala, in the capital city, in some churches. But it'll be another amazing trip, and to see what God's going to do. So if you'd like to give, you can I can post the website in the thing below, and all donations are actually tax deductible. I do have a 501c3 which is called Engage the Nations. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. God bless you.